Welcome to the First Lady of Nutrition podcast. Louise Gittleman is a New York Times bestselling author of over 37 books on diet, detox, the environment, and women's health. For more than 4 decades, Louise has been regarded as a leading voice and visionary in nutrition and who has fearlessly stood on the front lines of holistic and integrative medicine. For more information, check out AnnLouise.com. That's AnnLouise.com. And here's your host, Louise Gittleman.
Hey everyone, Louise Gittleman here for First Lady of Nutrition podcast. Today we have a man that's known as the Body Whisperer. He's promising that chronic illness can disappear much faster than you think, and he is a practitioner of quantum medicine protocols. Welcome, Dr. Lonnie Herman. Dr. Herman, why are you the Body Whisperer? You're known to be an absolute magician when it comes to getting rid of chronic illness. You're curing the incurable. How do you do what you do? Tell us all your secrets.
Well, what I've learned in the past is through schooling is that it's all disease is caused by chronic hidden infections and toxins and even inflammatory chemicals that are produced in the body due to inflammation, like activated mast cells, for example, that cause inflammation. And for many years, I was following the course of action that most doctors do, which is running different laboratories, running blood tests, looking for different antibodies and different types of infections in the blood or heavy metals in the blood, and running different labs for hair analysis for heavy metals and urine analysis for heavy metals and urine analysis for different kinds of infections for bladder conditions and complete neurological examination with a patient and food sensitivity panels. We'd run an adrenal hormone, cortisol or circadian rhythm panels, and expanded hormone panels for both men and or women. And I was realizing over years and genetic testing even we were doing. And I was realizing, I came upon my realization that these labs, in many cases, whether somebody had lupus or somebody had abdominal bloating without having any other condition, or they had multiple sclerosis, or they had asthma, or they had high blood pressure, there were a lot of patients whose labs were coming back to me with barely anything found in them. And I'm talking very extensive laboratory studies that we were doing. And
frustrating. How frustrating.
It was very frustrating because people were coming to me for answers, and they had already been to other doctors, of course. There were many people who've been to literally one other doctor, or there are others who've been to 20, 25 other doctors before they had ever come to me in the past, as well as in present. And it was very frustrating because there was no real finding from a very complete, thorough 1.5 hour neurological examination. There were no problems in the labs. There were no infections from breath test analysis for infections in the stomach. There was nothing wrong in their hormones. There was nothing wrong in the blood test, maybe a high cholesterol if somebody thinks that that's the biggest deal. But it was very frustrating. It was very frustrating. Some people with no infections in their stool tests or barely any infection in their stool test. And it just didn't make sense. And there could be heavy metals that are out of range. But even with the heavy metal analysis, something that puzzled me many years ago, not today, but puzzled me many years ago, is where were these metals located in the person's body, in their brain, in their organs, in their bone marrow, in their lymph? And there was no way to tell from those types of labs. And a very interesting discussion I had with a PhD in immunology who taught me about immunology and shared with all the doctors in the class when I took this course in neuroimmunology. He had shared with us research papers from around the world where these scientists who were not paid for, their research was not paid for by drug companies, where the drug companies want the drug that they're selling.
Very unusual.
Yeah, and he shared with us these research papers that proved that people with rheumatoid arthritis, they had parasitic infections in their joints, that were conclusive statements or I would say that the statement at the end was a conclusive statement that showed that the parasites in the joints caused the arthritis. There were studies where they showed that there was mercury from a tooth on a thyroid gland, mercury from like dental amalgam, or some people call silver fillings, that can seep from a tooth to the thyroid and make the thyroid sick and make a Hashimoto's autoimmune thyroiditis condition. And there were many other studies about MS and lupus and asthma. And so in my conversation with this doctor, this immunologist, after I took this course, which really opened my eyes to the reality of what causes these diseases, including cancer as well, is that how do I find if there's mercury in somebody's thyroid? I'm not going to take a biopsy of their thyroid when they come to my clinic. And that's no, he said, of course not. And I said, well,
right. How do you find these things stuck in the glands, in the
yeah.
joints, in the tissues, and emotions as well? I bet you find.
Oh, you know it. And emotions are driven by chronic hidden infections and toxins that get into parts of the brain. And I did study psychology for a while. I took some courses in psychiatry. I'm not a psychiatrist. I don't prescribe the drugs that they do. And I got deep into emotion work as well. And I came to a conclusion through certain studies with certain patients where we help them overcome depression, anxiety, and other pain disorders that were linked to their emotions, that all of these diseases, all of these symptoms were driven by infections and toxins hidden in certain parts of the body. Well, the research that I stumbled upon about probably about 9 years ago, that there was work that was produced by biophysicists and even in quantum physics, where they discovered that every single organism had its own individual frequency.
Isn't this like Rife medicine, Rife frequencies?
Sure, correct. Yes, the answer is yes. So Rife discovered back in the early 1900s that, as so the story goes, that he found that the different colors under a microscope of let's say a virus like influenza virus is a virus. It's different than Epstein-Barr virus, or different than measles, or different than mumps, or different than herpes. And there were different kinds of herpes viruses. So he discovered that there were different frequencies, and he thought that he could, I would say, attack or position the same frequency of that offending agent infection that caused the disease. He would knock out that infection with the same frequency of itself. And I had a Rife machine for a few years, and I personally was not seeing the results with the Rife machine. I believed in the idea, I just couldn't make it happen for a person. Meaning I couldn't help them recover from their condition, whether it was asthma or lupus or MS or diabetes or heart disease. It just neuropathy, nerve pains in the body. It just wasn't working. And even with cancer, it just wasn't working, as they say that he thought that cancer would be resolved with using that equipment. Yet it's still, the frequency idea made sense to me. And I had seen video footage under a microscope, which is actually on YouTube, where it showed that there was frequency meeting the frequency of a matching frequency, meeting the frequency of a parasite in a cell. And they made that one particular cell, the parasite in the cell, destroyed. And none of the other cells in that microscopic analysis were destroyed because they were not the ones infected by that parasite. So I spoke really fast about that there, but the bottom line is what biophysicists discovered is what Rife said, is that frequencies are in every single tissue of the body. Frequencies are individual, one different frequency for the stomach, different than the thyroid, different than the frontal lobe of the brain, different than the prostate or the ovary, and so on goes with the bone marrow, the lymph. Every single tissue in the human body has its own individual frequency, like a frequency of a radio station. You know, if you turn the radio dial on the FM dial from 103.5 to 100.7, those different numbers called frequencies will bring you different bits of information, different DJs and commercials and music coming out of those different radio station frequencies. Well, the cells of the body have their own individual frequencies as well. And the same goes for the viruses that are named different. They have their own individual character under a microscope. They have their own individual frequency, like that of a radio station number. The same goes for a different bacteria. We have staph infection. We have strep infection. We have gonorrhea. There's syphilis. There's E. coli. There's toxoplasma. There's many different bacteria, including those of the Lyme disease community. They have their own individual frequencies. They're different names, they're different frequencies. The same goes for heavy metals, the same for different toxins, whether it's a pesticide, weed killer spray, to even candidas and molds and mold toxins. They all have their own individual frequencies. So scientists had been able to create samples of these different parts of the body and samples of these different infections and toxins. And with this method that I have been working on for at least 9 years, I have found that when I examine a patient, I can find if there's a weak, for example, liver, and we can take that liver from a weak state to a strong state, or a diseased state to a healthy state, by finding which offending agent, infection, or chemical, or multiple infections or chemicals are in the liver.
So what are you finding? I mean, this sounds well and good, and I know I'm impressed with what I've seen on your website, LonnieHerman.com. But what are you finding that's so unusual? Why are you called a body whisperer?
I'm able to perform a certain exam without I can get much deeper into it. I don't know how far I can go with my description.
Deep enough for people to understand.
Well, we can find that when we do an exam, that when people think of, let me just point out, there's a group of doctors who call themselves functional medicine. They're functional doctors, and they're a functional neurologist. And I went through all of that schooling, by the way, for functional neurology, for functional medicine. And I was noticing, as I said earlier, that there was too many missing pieces. It wasn't connecting. I couldn't get the connection why one person who went gluten-free, for example, got better and one person didn't. And if the person ate gluten again, they felt all their symptoms come back, for example. Or one person could take hormones that were imbalanced, and then the other person could take hormones that were imbalanced, and one person felt better, one person felt no change, right? One person took an adrenal supplement, an adrenal cream that they rub on their body, and they could feel a bit more energy. Another person felt no change, even though they had similar laboratory results. And so in the end, and there's many more that I can give, so many different examples of patients where I was just seeing, like, what is the missing piece of the puzzle for the person? So when it comes to function of the human body, what I do with a patient, I can find, for example, with their function, if, let's say, somebody has a chronic cough or a chronic asthma problem, I can go through, which I developed a whole respiratory analysis, or a series of strategies where we can ask the person, for example, to take a deep breath in through their mouth, let's say, or provide a fake cough, for example, or clearing their throat, for example. I find their body becomes stressed. There's a reflex that we're able to measure with the body, a stress response. And the body should not become stressed just by taking a deep breath. But if it does reveal, with a method that I practice, that there's a weakening of the human body's energy by taking a deep breath through their mouth, even if they didn't cough or choke, or they're not even short of breath, we find with that deep breath that the connecting organ could, let's say, it could be the stomach. And in the stomach, we find the parasite. And now when they take a deep breath, when the body knows that we're going to get rid of the parasite from the stomach, that the body is no longer weakened by taking that deep breath, for example. And now I can have somebody clear their throat. And when they clear their throat, the body becomes stressed. And we pose the body a sample of the human trachea, of the perfect frequency of that human trachea. So when we put that trachea on the testing equipment and the body's stress level disappears, we know that clearing their throat, the reason why they're constantly congested in their throat, for example, is because there's something in the trachea. Now we have to find which offending infection is in there. I'm able to get a person during the exam to a point where there is no more weakness in the body. There is no more observed stress reaction when it's either their breathing stress, their skin rashes, their weakness in their legs, for example. There's so many different functions that I can incorporate. And again, I don't know how deep I can go into my description. I'm trying to give some highlights here, but I did produce a video that's on my website, which was drlonnieherman.com, by the way. It was drlonnieherman.com.
drlonnieherman.com, everybody. Dr. Lonnie.
I've got a video. I've got a book there that people can read. It's free for them to download. They can read the book. It takes maybe an hour. And I go into a bit better detail of the history of my work. And there's a video that they can click on, which takes about 42 minutes for me to describe my background, as well as some insight to the method of what I'm doing here. And again, it's years and years and years of focus and concentration and studies and practice that it's so much to describe just in a few minutes here. But that video that's on the link at the end of my book, again, free book, read it within less than an hour, click on that link, watch a private video that I put on my website that you can only find when you click on that link on the last page of my free book. And I describe in better detail about how this method works.
So what are the surprising things you're finding with chronic illness? People have had MS, for example. Are you finding some kind of common thread?
The only common thing, and I've listened to other doctors on different radio shows and podcasts and read different papers that they've written. And people try to link. There's the heavy metal toxic group of practitioners. There's the Lyme disease only group of practitioners. There's the gluten only or dairy and so on only group of practitioners. Everything is caused by the food. Everything is caused by Lyme. Everything is caused by heavy metals. There are those who believe that they can run laboratories. I'm giving you the answer in just a moment. It's just that every laboratory, even if they found that there is a herpes virus in the lab, or they found that there is the Epstein-Barr virus in the blood lab, or they found there's candida in the blood lab, there are different types of supplements they can provide the person, but there's no one exact supplement that is the do it for everything infection that's in the tissue, in the bloodstream. I'm sorry. So let's just say that there is Epstein-Barr that they find in a blood test, and they find that the person's Lyme positive, and they find that the person has herpes, and they find that the person has heavy metals. I'm going to tell you that it's a combination of everything. The answer to your question is it's a combination of, most often with every patient, it's everything. Every person I get to examine who's suffering from chronic disease, every single one with chronic disease, people are contaminated with multiple molds. People have fungal infections. People have parasitic infections, bacteria infections. They have multiple viruses and multiple different toxins. So the common thread is we have to be able to use a very clear, precise method of analyzing the body and being able to find something that truly works, which this does, by the way, which we can find the layers of the different infections and different toxins that are in the different tissues of the human body and start provide them with safe and highly effective, I'll just use the word formulas that will help the person get rid of any chemical and any toxin in the body. And there's even further, there are people who have used drugs, right? They've done cocaine, they have taken painkiller pills, they've been through surgeries, they've been through dental work, they've had vaccines. We have to be able to find even these chemicals. There was one woman who came to me. I do have a video of her up online. I won't mention which one, but there was one. She had over 20 years of anxiety. She had hand burning pain, insomnia. She had nausea, vomiting. She had migraine headaches. And I'll tell you, I found with her that it was cocaine use from years ago.
Oh my God.
It was in her brain. And when we got it with these safe and very highly effective formulas, when we got these cocaine out of the brain, the nausea, the vomiting, the migraines, it completely stopped. She was so weak in her legs because the migraines were so terrible. She couldn't even walk into my clinic. Somebody literally underneath each arm to help her come from the parking lot into my clinic. And within just a few days of taking these remedies, her body, all the nausea, all the vomiting, all the weakness in her legs, and the migraines stopped within, I think it was about 4 or 5 days. Gone.
That's miraculous. That's why they call you the body whisperer. What are you finding with Parkinson's? Hi, my friends. Before I go any further, let me take a moment to acknowledge my sponsor, Unikey Health, at unikeyhealth.com, which is your universal key to health since 1992. I have been a spokesperson for this company for over 30 years. They're the home of all my weight loss plans, the Fat Blasting Bio Builder, which has been featured in national magazines. They also carry the Ultimate Brain Support and the Magnesium Multitasker. So whether it's weight loss, internal cleansing, or just targeted health support, go to unikeyhealth.com. Tell them Ann Louise sent you.
I find with Parkinson's that I don't totally believe in a dopamine deficiency situation. There are many studies from around the world, and if people know how to do the research and look up certain keywords online to find in certain published medical journals, there are studies of people or papers written about people who were fine when they went on vacation and they were bitten by certain mosquitoes, and all of a sudden they had tremors, they had body shaking. And it was when they ran spinal tap on the person to check their spinal fluid, they found West Nile virus in them. That was conclusive statement that it was the West Nile that caused their tremors. There are people who've had St. Louis encephalitis virus. They've had malaria in them from mosquito bites. I'm not only blaming mosquitoes, but there are terrible bugs. But we have transfer of organisms into the body and even chemicals. That cause a Parkinson's type of symptom. When there was a study that was done in Japan it's actually called Minamata disease. And anybody can look that up online, Minamata disease. You can see video.
The mercury study.
Yeah, and that was what happened with these men and women in this fisher, let's just say it's a village where they were called them fishermen. Excuse me, it was men and women, where they developed all of a sudden seizure-like and Parkinson's-like symptoms, and they found also that the cats on the island started acting strange and producing symptoms like seizures and Parkinson's type of symptoms in these cats. And they noticed that the cats were eating the fish. And when they tested the fish, there was mercury in the fish from the water. They found that the big fertilizer company was dumping its waste into the water. It was mercury from the fertilizer that was in the water. The mercury got in the fish. The people ate the fish. The people developed the symptoms. They found it was a mercury poisoning of the brain that caused their Parkinson's-like symptoms. So each individual person with a Parkinson's type of tremor movement disorder, Parkinson's is only one of about 100 different movement disorders in the textbooks. And I took movement disorder courses in postgraduate studies in neurology. And the bottom line is that it could be mercury toxicity in the brain. There could be dental anesthesia chemicals from dental work that were, once they injected the tooth to numb the tooth, to pull the tooth or fill a tooth or do a root canal, the injection, the chemical had to spread through the bloodstream. I mean, 4 or 5 hours later, after the numbing chemical wore off and somebody could feel their tooth again and speak and swallow and spit normally again. I don't know if anybody's been in a dental chair who's listening to this, who's had
we've all been there.
Yeah, so the motor control gets numb. Even somebody when the mouth is numb, even their tongue can't work properly. And their spitting sense, and they try to rinse their mouth out with water in the dental chair, and sometimes they're drooling on themselves because it doesn't work normal. So it's not just numbness or sensory loss, it's motor control loss of the system. When 4 hours passes and the numbing chemical from the mouth wears off, where did it go? And let's just say,
where did it go, Dr. Herman?
Well, I'm finding it in the basal ganglia of the brain that controls movements. I find it in the substantia nigra of the brain that controls dopamine production. I find it in the frontal lobe. I find it in the cortex of the brain. I find it in the thalamus of the brain. I find it in the kidneys. I find it in the lymph. And people can live for years. It's like having a tattoo ink put in their skin and their arm. It's going to stay there for 20, 30, 50, 60 years, as long as they're alive. The tattoo doesn't leave. They don't have to go back and get tattooing put in them again. Well, people say, I mentioned what people think in a moment when I bring this topic up, but that anesthetic that they put into your mouth to numb a tooth or pull a tooth at 10 years old, let's say, that numbing chemical can go to a part of your brain and your kidney and never leave it, like ink in the arm, like a tattoo in the arm. So now 10 years, 20 years, 30 years, 40 years passes by. And if there was no ADD that was created from that chemical in the brain, and there was no back pain that happened, now all of a sudden a tremor can start, like a Parkinson's. Or people can get depression. People can have anxiety. People can have thyroid disease. People can have other symptoms, fatigue even, that can happen just from the anesthetic. I'm not knocking the dentist. They have to numb your mouth to pull a tooth or drill in a tooth. It'd be crazy, barbaric work if they were to do that without numbing you. But you've got to understand that numbing chemical, when it wore off from your mouth, it didn't just disappear. And what I was going to say a minute ago is that people will say, well, my detox systems are working. Well, how do you know that? There was a study done in 2005 called The Body Burden about the newborns born in the United States in good cities, not Flint, Michigan, where they said lead in the water. They ran in different cities across the United States in different hospitals. They took biopsies of babies' tissues right there at birth. The babies were still attached to the cord of the mother. The babies had no vaccine. The babies were healthy at birth, no Down syndrome, no missing limbs, nothing wrong with them, no illness. They found these babies. They took biopsies of the tissues right there at birth. Any gender, race, or religion was studied. They found 287 toxic cancer-causing chemicals in the babies at birth. They found the same when they studied the mother's blood. We're talking plastic, DDT insecticide, weed killer spray, birth control pill residue, different antibiotics, lead, arsenic, mercury, you name it, 287. I didn't even mention 287 poisons in the baby's body at birth. So
we're born with these things now.
We're born with it. And then I'll add on the vaccines, add on antibiotics for ear infections, add on whatever else is in the food and in the water, radon, and so many different toxins get in the body. So now people start noticing a deficit in their function, whether it's a brain fog, whether it's a attention deficit disorder with the child. Maybe there's depression in childhood, anxiety in childhood, or somebody later in life, has a trauma. They fall and hit their head. They're given a medication, and that medication over time that can take away the pain does, because the body's so toxic. We're born with that toxic burden. But those chemicals in medications, and maybe somebody had a surgery, the anesthetic chemical, the sedatives that they give people, they stay in the body. They're not alleviated. The painkillers, they're not just removed because you think, that you went into a sauna or had a lymph drainage massage or took a quote unquote liver or kidney detox supplement from Whole Foods or another company that you bought it online. We've got to be able to look at the body with a very unique way, a very unique system, and listen to the body whisper to us and tell us it's this infection and this particular exact chemical that's in this part of the brain, whether it's in the basal ganglia or it's in the frontal lobe or it's in the adrenal gland, can be infected or toxic. We have to get those chemicals and infections out of those particular sites so the person can finally feel rejuvenated.
Now, there are a lot, let me just rudely interrupt or tactfully interrupt. There are many other systems that profess to do this. What's unique about yours is that you calibrate what the body is ready to release in a particular order. You prioritize. Am I correct?
Yes.
Well, that makes you very different. That makes you a body whisperer for excellence.
Well, part of it, yet, the better thing is about it, because some people talk about priorities first, like what you just mentioned about me. But the thing is that we're able to, number one, see the physical change in the person pretty rapidly. Let's just say, for example, that the person went to a dentist. I'm not knocking a dentist whenever, I'm just referencing one thing in life, is that they went to a dentist, they got the injection in their mouth, that dentist fixed the tooth, but now they had chronic sinus problems ever since the numbing chemical went in their mouth. I'm able to actually examine the person, find that it was the numbing chemical in their sinus cavity, provide them the remedy that's going to target that numbing chemical. When they take that remedy within hours, minutes to hours, then the congestion to the sinus disappears. We know we did the right thing, and it never comes back, the sinus problem. When somebody comes back to me for an exam, I'm able to test that individual tissue where we found the infection or chemical in, and I can tell that that infection or chemical is gone from that organ. We can tell immediately in the exam. So that's how we know that it's leaving the body. One way we know that it's leaving the body is because the symptoms
disappear,
decrease or disappear or decrease. I mean, disappear, yes, it might take a person multiple treatments to have the symptom disappear. It's just because, again, I said earlier that there are multiple layers. What if somebody has 21 infections and 10 chemicals that's in one part of the body? It might take a bit longer for the alleviation of the symptom or complete relief of the symptom from John to Jane, right? Because somebody has more pieces of the puzzle that we have to handle.
Let me ask you another question. What are these quantum medicine energized treatments? Are they homeopathic?
It's similar to that in a sense, because homeopathy is like cures like is the idea. Yet these, what we're making in our lab with our equipment, it's not the classical homeopathic remedy. It's the same premise. It's the same idea, the same science of like cures like, but it's not the classical homeopathic remedy. That if people ever been to homeopathy, a type of practitioner, which I'll tell you many years ago, I really thought it was like a farce, quite honestly. I didn't know about it. I just thought, like, what is that? What are they talking about? Because I was so sold on all the laboratories and running deep, detailed medical type studies and going over it with people and following that type of mindset until I saw that there was people who weren't getting better, and I had to expand my mind and skill set. So I'll just tell you that homeopathy has done a lot for people over more than 100 years. It's just that there's still, we have to be even more precise than what that can be and what that system. So we're able to make the frequency copy in water. And if people want to know more about that, you can look up a video on YouTube called Water's Memory. Water's Memory. And you can even, if you know about Dr. Emoto, who was a Japanese doctor, scientist, he proved that emotions are programmed in water, that water can carry the energy of anything, really. It can carry the energy of anything. So put Emoto's work together with what these scientists in Water's Memory discovered, Nobel Prize winners, by the way. In Water's Memory, what they're describing is that they were able to make a frequencied water type of homeopathic remedy and provide it to the person. And let's say the strep throat disappeared within hours of providing them the remedy carrying the frequency of the strep that was in their throat. So we're able to pinpoint exactly which infection or chemical is specifically in which tissue and make the frequency of that infection or that chemical in that part of the body. When the person takes that remedy, it will match the energy of that drug or that chemical or that infection that's in that part of the body, like mold in their lungs or dental mercury on their thyroid or dental anesthetic in the basal ganglia of the brain. And when they take that remedy, that chemical is gone. That infection is gone.
Forever, God willing.
Forever, unless you, understand. I mean, if you have to go to a dentist again and they inject you again, now you'll know that after that poison is put back in, which it is a poison, it's still needed. I'm not knocking the dentist or the drug company. We need them. I know I've had dental work in my life. I'm grateful that they exist. It's just that the chemical goes there and we have to get it out. So now your listeners can be aware that that is a possibility of what can cause their fatigue or cause their pain or cause their foot pain or cause their headache. And we can find that poison and get it out. Now, there are, it's just life on the planet. I mean, you're going to pick up other infections and chemicals. There's almost no way around it. We try our best to be clean with organic food. We try our best to be clean with good, pure water. But there's just sometimes we go to restaurants and like we leave our conscious mind at the door at the hostess stand and eat the food that's not totally organic, even if we want to be organic. So let's just understand that there's still pollution around us. But when we get rid of those major contributors of the disease, like if it was from a surgical chemical that got in the person's brain that caused them to have a deficit in their function, or a drug they took, a medication they took that got in the brain and caused their physical deficit, when we get it out of there, that won't come back, because unless you take that drug again, of course, but that won't come back. So
Excellent.
I'll tell you that I've seen people, and I've got video proof of what I'm saying. There's people with a lifetime of asthma gone, a lifetime of rashes on their body gone, joint pains for decades gone, stomach pains gone, even getting off high blood pressure medication, and the list goes on. So the success that we've had, it's spanning across different diseases, and we don't need to run the labs on them for the sense of running to find if there's candida or a virus or mycoplasma or toxoplasma. We can find those infections in the tissues with the system, and we know we're getting it done because we see the symptoms really, they disappear pretty rapidly.
So do people have to see you in person as we start closing out this particular podcast?
Yes, that would be the best. The hands-on exam really is my most prized way of and proud way of.
And where are you?
Southeast Florida right now. Southeast
So
Florida.
people fly into.
There's Fort Lauderdale, Hollywood International Airport, or Miami.
That's very convenient.
Yeah. And the Fort Lauderdale Airport's only like 10 minutes from my clinic.
So you promise people they'll break free from chronic pain and reclaim optimal health. It may take several months, though.
Sure. Yes.
Tell us where people can find you online, Dr. Lonnie Herman.
Yeah, DrLonnieHerman, drLonnieHerman.com. They can also find me on my Facebook page, my Instagram, and I'm also on YouTube. And there's a lot of videos that we have. There's videos where I'm describing what I found in people, and that provided them the incredible relief from with their condition. And I'm very proud of it, and I love doing it. There's no greater there's no greater joy and no greater, I think, service to humanity, service in life, than to help a person overcome their disease or
So
nothing else.
you're truly a doctor of cure.
Well, I won't use the word cure. That's not legal for me to say. I am the doctor who.
But I can say it.
You can say it. I won't say it. But I will tell you that the body can cure itself, and I can.
That's
and
what I was wanting you to say.
We've got to be able to get the disease-causing infections and chemicals out of the person and let that person just regenerate their function, rejuvenate their function, and that's what it's all about.
So I want to thank you for being my guest, Dr. Lonnie Herman. Will you come back?
Absolutely. Thank you. I look forward to it. I appreciate you giving me this chance to share my story with everybody in your group, and thank you so much.
And people will be hearing you in France and Spain and Ireland and Cambodia and Vietnam. We're now trending in all these major countries, as well as the United States and Canada. So thank you all for being with me yet once again for First Lady of Nutrition podcast. And Louise Gittleman saying goodbye, good luck, shalom uvracha. Please don't forget to subscribe and like First Lady of Nutrition podcast. Thank you so very much.